Hi, my name is Ann Carollo, and I'm the owner of Gulf Coast Dance Center, and today I'm going to show you how to sew a pointe shoe. Today I'm going to teach you how to sew a pointe shoe the way that I sew a pointe shoe. Now, I've worn pointe shoes for many decades at this point, and I was a dancer who would go through pointe shoes very quickly. So I had to learn a really strong and fast method to get my ribbons and elastics on. But with that said, as a teacher now, I realize there's a lot of beginner youth students and beginner adult students who are kind of handed over a pointe shoe and they weren't really taught or explained the how or why. So we have the how, which I'm going to talk about, but I'm also going to dig into the why, because there's a lot of different ways that we can sew our pointe shoes and modify them. And so I want to make sure that you're doing it the best way for your foot, because whatever we're doing, we want to make our feet look as absolutely gorgeous as possible. So let's dig in. Okay, I have everything here that I would need, and I'm going to introduce you to a few other things. So you will have your pointe shoes. You buy them separate. So first, you're going to get fitted at a store with a pair of pointe shoes, and you're going to buy that. Then, unbeknownst to most people, you actually need to buy the elastic and ribbon as a separate piece to your shoes. So you're going to try to get ones that match the same color. So there are different colors of pointe shoes. This one's like a real soft Euro pink. There's more of a peach. So I have that. And then I also have two different kinds of ribbons. There are actually three different kinds of ribbons. We have these that are satin, but they have an insert of elastic. I love these. This is what I've transitioned to as I've danced in life, and I'll explain why I really like them. And then you have your standard satin, so no stretch, nothing, it's just a piece of satin. And there's a third kind that's new and out, and some professionals like it. I don't choose it or recommend it to my students, but it is basically looks like a ribbon, but the whole ribbon is actually elastic. And again, that's something that I think that if you're a professional and you want to make that choice, that's fine. But for students, I really prefer a solid satin. It allows the foot and ankle to really feel the shoe attachment on the foot. Okay, so that's the pieces that are actually going to be sewn together. And then you're going to need thread, typically a thread in the same color. Today I'm going to use a green to show you how to sew so you can see my thread and my stitch marks. I have my needle. You can also purchase what they call stitch kits. So they have everything you need in them, usually like thread, a needle, different things, little kits on tips on how to sew. Some OGs of the ballet world use dental floss because it almost never rips. So it's super, super strong. A good pair of scissors. And then you're going to need a lighter or a set of matches. What I'll say is I tend to prefer this because it fits in my dance bag. But a lot of people don't feel very comfortable with these, so you can also use one that you light your barbecue grill with, or matches. But again, whatever you do, there's a flame involved, so just be careful. So now we're gonna prep everything we need to sew our pointe shoes. So in that kit, you got the elastic and the ribbon, and the elastic comes as one solid piece. Now I've already gone ahead and cut this, but it normally looks about like this, just connected. You're gonna fold it in half, and you're gonna cut it in half, okay? Now, I'm gonna teach you the standard way that I teach all my beginner students to do it. However, as you age up or as you advance or as you need different things from your pointe shoes, you may need to sew your pointe shoes differently. But again, in today's video, I really wanna teach the standard, basic, great place everyone should start. So that means we need 2 pieces of elastic. Next, let's prep our ribbon. So I have 4 of these. They actually come already apart. However, if I did not purchase the elastic ribbon, the one that has the elastic inserted, you're gonna get one very large piece of satin. So to create 4 equal parts, you're gonna take your large piece of satin, fold it in half, cut, and take each of those pieces, like if it was this, fold it in half again and cut again. So you end up with 4 equal pieces of satin. But like I said, this one when I purchased, it actually comes as 4 separate pieces already prepped as far as that. Now, I still have to prep these. So if you choose these, why I like them is a satin ribbon is going to give you more strength and support in your ankle as you wear your pointe shoe. So I always have my beginner students start in either a basic standard satin ribbon or the satin with the insert. I love the insert because it allows for a little bit more mistakes to be allowable in tying your shoes. So maybe you tied your shoe a little too tight, which will cut into the Achilles and can cause a lot of discomfort and cause a student to have to retie. This really alleviates any kind of Achilles tendonitis or any kind of Achilles issues that might be inflamed back here. And so that is what I prefer. I'm gonna show you how to prep these because they come in a standard size, but we do not have standard size feet. So I'm gonna put my shoe on. And there are two sides. If you notice, there is going to be, from the elastic, there is a long side and a short side. I need the short side. I'm going to place the elastic on the back of my Achilles, and I'm gonna pull the short side over into the inside of my foot. So I'm on the inside of my arch, and I'm gonna look for about an inch past, and then that's where I'm going to trim my ribbon. Okay, and so now I have to remember this is the inside ribbon because the outside ribbon will be a different size. So this is where I'm gonna take that lighter and I'm going to just melt a little bit of the edge of the satin so it doesn't fray. Because if you don't do this, your satin will start to fray and then whatever stitches you put, it'll just pull right through. Okay, so that's the inside, so I'm gonna set that over there. And now I'm gonna just work on one shoe today right now, so I'm gonna set these aside. That way I don't get anything mixed up. This is on the inside, and I highly suggest this, like really making your piles and focusing on one at a time so you don't get yourself confused and things get messed up. Now I'm gonna do the opposite. So I'm gonna turn a little bit. So I'm gonna put this behind my Achilles. The short side is going to come across, and I'm gonna go to the outside of my foot, okay? And I'm gonna look at about an inch down, past the top of the shoe. I'm going to cut that one. And then I'm gonna singe that ribbon. Okay, and this is the outside of my foot. I'm gonna put it over here. So now I have both ribbons prepped and I have this prepped. Now we're gonna get into where do we place them. So every person's foot is different. And this is why, there's a great question. A lot of people ask me, why do pointe shoes not come sewn already? Well, it's because every person's foot is different. So we're trying to fit a million different foot sizes into maybe 30 different styles of pointe shoes. I think there might be even more than that now, which is great. But we're all trying to fit into something standard, but we need it to be just perfect for us. So we're gonna look at my foot real quick. So when I point my foot, I have a really high arch, but also my arch is really high up my foot. So the heel is here. Some people, their foot bends a little bit more central and mine sits really high. So what I have all my students do is they get on their pointe shoe and I'm gonna have them point their foot and I'm gonna find the place where the end of that arch meets the shoe, okay? And this will be different for each brand of shoe. So I will, you know, there's a seam here, so every pointe shoe I wear, I'm not gonna necessarily sew it in relation to the seam the same. Every new brand of shoe I wear, I have to reevaluate where that is going to be set. So for me here, my finger's about there, I'm gonna be sewing my ribbon a tiny little bit over the seam, like to here, and then I'm gonna sew it about back here, okay? What that's gonna do for me is when I tie my shoe, it's going to pull the shank up against my foot so it makes the shape of my foot the best it can be, as well as supporting the shoe on the foot. Okay, so that's that. And I guess we're gonna go ahead and get to sewing. I'm gonna go ahead and draw out a diagram of what we're gonna actually be doing with our threads so it's more visual, and I hope that that allows you to understand the process a little better. So we're gonna start first with our knot. So here's our knot, there's the tail. We're going into the shoe. So from the inside of the shoe, we're gonna be pressing the needle in. What's gonna happen is behind the shoe, you're gonna come up and you're gonna come back through the shoe, straight above. I'm going to diagonally put the thread here. So the straight line is what you will see of your thread. The diagonal is going behind the shoe. You can't see it, okay? But I'm staying in line right here and I've created a diagonal. Now I'm going to go up again, behind the shoe. So I've pushed through and I'm looping behind, coming above and going diagonal, going back into the shoe thread, or shoe fabric, I should say, on the inside. And go up. Let's do one more. We have that one, da, da, da. Okay, so at this point we've created 5 diagonals. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, take that back. 5, there, and the thread goes behind. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 diagonals. So that is moving in that direction. I'm right-handed, so I move that way. If you were left-handed, you would just start your diagonals going the other way. Okay, so I'm gonna change colors to make it easy. So that was, again, moving in that direction. Now I've completed, I've pushed into the shoe, and my thread is gonna come up, and I'm gonna come through another hole. What I'm going to do now is connect the dots. So this thread is gonna come through and go into where this thread has also gone into the shoe. I've now created a complete X. So here it is behind the shoe again. I'm gonna come up right here, and I'm gonna go down. And I'm gonna run behind the shoe, and I'm gonna come up through this hole, and I'm gonna go down, circling behind the shoe, back through the fabric, connect this dot to this dot, behind, and then here coming up in, and then come down. Okay, so lastly, I've put it into about here, but there's my knot. What I will do is come back through the shoe, maybe over here. So I'm catching some of the thread of the fabric, so then I can take this thread that has come through, and I can knot these two together. So I want them to go together before I cut the tails. And now I've created X's, just like if you do cross stitch. So there's 1X, 2X, 3, 4, 5. Again, you do diagonals this way, and then you just come back, making the tightest and strongest attachment for your ribbon. We're now gonna prep our needle and thread. So a really clever, safe place to keep your needle is in your clothes. So just kind of throw it in your legging, in a shirt, whatever you're wearing. And then we're gonna prep our thread. So let's get a nice long piece. I double my thread to make it stronger. That's why a lot of people use the dental floss. But I like to double it not only just for the strength, but it also makes sure I don't lose my needle, because then it's not gonna fall off. Okay, we're gonna take the 2 end pieces and pull them. The needle is just gonna fall to the bottom, and I'm going to tie a knot. So to you, I come around. It's going behind the longer one, and then I'm just gonna kind of pull that through and pull. The first one's the easiest. The second one, you're gonna try to get your knot in the exact same place. So you do the same thing. It wraps over, goes behind, comes around. I hold the tail, and I draw this over, and I go slow just to make sure. And I actually, if you hold the knot, that'll also help you bring it to the knot. So now I have 2, and that's what I wanna have, okay? And now I'm gonna get sewing. So here is the inside ribbon for my shoe, and this is the inside of my shoe that I've decided. This one already has a little fold from a crease, but this is what I do to create extra stability in my ribbon. And again, remember, this is my version that I've used for decades. I've never had a ribbon fall off. You might have a teacher show you a different way, but this is my way. And I needed it to sit. There's the outside seam, and there's an inside seam. So I'm gonna place it right here. It looks pretty centered with that one, but if we look on the outside, this one is offset, okay? At this point, I've gotten pretty good about how to feel where things are, but I'm going to double my ribbon in half, and I'm gonna sew through both, and that creates much stronger. So that's why I left that inch, because I knew I was gonna fold it in half. The other thing as you sew you need to be aware of is there is a casing here for a drawstring. Most shoes have a drawstring, not all, but most. There's a drawstring. The one thing you don't want to do is sew through the drawstring, because you won't actually be able to pull this tight. And right now I have mine in a relaxed state, so I can sew it. If it was pulled tight, all of this would be curled in, and it would be really hard to sew. So I tried to get mine out as far as I could from my fitting. Okay, let's get sewing. So we're gonna start with the bottom. So I'm gonna go in from the inside of the shoe, in. I'm gonna try to keep that ribbon out of the way, all the way down, and I'm gonna make sure my tail is nice and in there. Then I'm gonna come up. So I come right above that knot, but I'm still just sitting under here. And I'm gonna pull up. Now I'm gonna create my first diagonal. And so I'm gonna go diagonally across, and I'm gonna put in where that knot is on the same line and level. And there's a nice diagonal. On my ribbons, I try to get 5 diagonals. That's what I seem to feel the most stable. Just make sure your tail doesn't get caught up. These are all things that happen while you're sewing. Up, and then going back down again. So far I have 3. Again, that tail got caught, just pull it out. There's number 4. I'm gonna squeeze in a number 5. And down. And right now they're starting to look like lines. I should have started maybe a tiny bit over, but it's not a big deal because this is where the stability is gonna come. So I've gone diagonally this way, now I'm gonna come up. So I'm gonna come straight up from this one, and I'm gonna squeeze it in there. And then here's where it's easier. I'm gonna follow, I'm gonna connect the dots. So now I'm gonna come over and connect into that dot and pull in and down. I'm gonna come up through next to or right directly, wherever it hits. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about being perfect. I'm gonna go diagonal and hit right down here. The most important thing is that you're creating this crisscross pattern, which creates a lot of strength. Pull through. I'm gonna go down on the diagonal. Again, being careful. I was going a little high there. Be careful of your drawstring. Down. And I'll tell you another reason why I really like this pattern and this way of doing it is you'll notice I'm almost done. So I've gotten to the point this method allows me to sew a pair of pointe shoes probably in 15 minutes. So to finish, I'm gonna come back up right next to that knot. So I came across, right? And I'm already really close to that knot. I'm not gonna try to come back up the exact same hole. I'm gonna come off a little bit, offset from it, maybe to the other side of the knot and pull up. What that's gonna allow me to do is make it really, really simple to tie a knot. So I'm gonna grab that tail and just like tying your shoes, I'm gonna tie 1, and I'm gonna come around, and I'm gonna tie 2, okay? From here, I tend to leave a little bit of a tail so nothing comes undone. And now I have 1 ribbon sewn. And what again, I love if I pull, like that is not coming off, okay? Because the number one thing you definitely don't want to have do, and I've seen it happen a lot of times, is a dancer is dancing in class or on stage and that ribbon just pops off. And that's either because they didn't, melt it and it came through the thread, or the threading was too little or not enough. So again, 5 simple X's and bam, that ribbon is like not coming off. And if you look on the other side, very little thread. And if this was pink, you would not see that. So that keeps this all very clean. And I'm sitting just below the drawstring and keeping it close to the shoe, okay? Because again, if you sew further down, this will sit away from the foot. So we want to keep it nice and close. So now I'm going to move on to the elastic. So I have my elastic, and what I'm gonna do, unlike the ribbons, I measured where I needed to have them and cut them prior to sewing. This one, I'm actually gonna sew 1/2 first before I measure what I need from the rest. The other thing you need to take into consideration when you sew is we're gonna actually create a diagonal. Every pointe shoe has a seam, so that point's gonna come in and there's gonna be a slight diagonal. So it actually goes around and wraps and lays real nicely against the ankle. If we were to sew straight up and down, which is what you would naturally think, then there's no space really for the ankle and it's gonna bulge and twist as it goes on the ankle. So I'm gonna angle that and I'm just gonna kind of hold it. If you need a straight pin, you can. I've never used a straight pin to hold it in place. I just kind of snug hold between my thumb. And just like the ribbons, I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna come above And I'm gonna go down. And this one, I would say on an elastic, I might do 4 diagonals. I don't seem to need 5 on these. 5 is just like the ribbon's a little wider. It has a little bit more pull on it on the foot. So I need it to be a little bit stronger. And then we're gonna go up one more time. Yeah. Again, I'm trying to be too much of a perfectionist. That's the dancer problem. And I'm gonna go down. Okay, and I'm gonna come back the other way. And one thing I'm noticing, I've never worn these shoes before. This is a new brand I'm trying. So every shoe sews a little differently. So if you have a shoe that is made out of one kind of fabric versus another, some will be really simple to sew or easy for the needle to get through, and some are gonna be really hard. I found that like my gainers, when I tried those, they were really hard to sew through, so it took a little bit more patience and a thimble. And then my blocks, they sew really easily. These are Nicolay, and they're sewing fairly easily as well. There's a little thickness where the seam meets, but you're just gonna adjust. Every shoe is different. And we're coming back diagonally the other way. Okay, so there we are again. There's my 4 X's, and I'm back in by my knot. So I'm gonna come in on the other side of my knot, back up, and I'm going to tie it twice. 1, 2. Oh my gosh, probably over the, I don't know, 30 years I've been in a pointe shoe, I've never had a knot come undone. I would highly suggest, especially on the heel, to not do more than 2, especially if you have a thicker thread, because this is going to rub on the back of your heel, and you want to keep this as smooth and as comfortable as possible so you don't create a blister. Okay, now I have to move to the next section, which means I actually have to figure out what size this is, or what size I need. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it on the foot. And I'm going to pull, because I need to keep some kind of resistance on this, because the whole point of this is, if you see I'm putting into a demi-point, I'm actually resisting the shoe. And the whole reason this is here is to keep this from slipping off my heel. Okay, so one of the other things I do is I'm gonna flex my foot now, and I'm gonna make sure that I can easily, so that's way too tight, I would say. So I'm gonna let it go just a little, because I wanna be able to get my fingers under here so I'm not cutting off any circulation. So it can be snug, but I need to be able to have some. When it was too tight, let me go back to that too tight, it was like really impossible to try to get my finger underneath that, okay? So again, I would say it's better to sew it looser than too tight, because you can always take it off and try again and tighten it. Once you've sewn it too tight and you've cut it, you can't add elastic back. So I always say, be safe, a little loose is better. So now I'm gonna hold it, and I'm gonna measure out maybe about a 1/2 inch past from where it is. And I'm gonna trim that and see how much I had to take off. And then this will come around, and I'm gonna sew it on the inside right there, and then that seems to be a good resistance that's keeping it on my heel. Okay. So moving back to the sewing, I'm gonna flip this, it makes it a little easier to see. Another reason why you wanna release the drawstring is I'm gonna flip it this way. Now make sure that that has that flat loop that'll go around your ankle. Make sure you didn't accidentally flip the elastic, and now it's gonna be twisted and not be able to sit on your ankle. So again, come up, keep the same side facing, and we're gonna create that diagonal again. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do the 4 X's across, and then my loop will be done. Now our shoe is fully sewn. So I have my elastic, and I have my 2 ribbons. Now we're gonna put on our foot, and we're gonna talk about how to finish adjusting all the pieces so it fits us perfectly. So I'm gonna slide through and in. Obviously you might be wearing a toe pad or something. Okay, so now that, because I put that angle in the elastic, you can see it now sits nice and flush against my ankle. And I have my ribbons, and I have my drawstring. Let's attack the drawstring first. So when I point my foot, there's a little bit of gapping in the fabric, all of that. So I'm gonna take and I'm gonna put one knot. Now I'm gonna pull, kind of snug. Now, see how that's already pulled up the shoe better to my foot, and it gets rid of a little bit of that. And now what we're gonna do, if that's where you like it, we're gonna tie in a knot one more time, okay? And what I have seen is a lot of new dancers will think, oh my gosh, I need to tie this into a bow. However, as a professional, we don't do that. Things can fall out. We always want everything to look as seamless as possible so our feet look the best. That is our job. So we're gonna take the drawstring out, and I'm going to come to where about a 1/2 inch from the tip of my shoe, and that's where I'm gonna trim it, okay? The reason why I do that is so when I put these inside my shoe, I will never find one of these under my toe, which would hurt and would affect my dancing. But I've also left myself a tail that if I need to adjust and take this knot out and do it again, I have room to do that. I have seen way too many dancers cut right at the knot come undone, and then the drawstring is just done for. And you can get them back through, but it is quite a job. Okay, so I'm gonna show you what that looks like. I would take my shoe off. I'm gonna shove these in here. I'm gonna push down. And as you wear your shoe, it'll just kind of naturally start to fold that way. Okay, so already much sleeker, right? Now the ribbons. Just like we had to cut the first part of the ribbon for the inside to the outside, we're going to do the same thing when we tie. So I'm going to go ahead and tie mine. I tie my inside first. I do a little bit of a pull, which again, pulls up that part of the shoe, which is why we put it there. See how it's going to like start to bend, and that's where my arch is. I'm going to flex my foot so my ankle is the biggest, and I'm going to pull it around. Now if I did this right, that elastic is now on my Achilles, which is what I want. So I'm going to go around. Then I have my second one. Again, that elastic is hitting my Achilles. And I come in, and you tie on the inside of your ankle. Okay, the reason why we tie on the inside of the ankle, there's a whole nother thing about this. Your ankle bone is here, your Achilles is here. There's a little indentation between, and that is the safest place to put your knot and tuck your ribbons. We don't want to have anything bulging here or hitting this bone, and we don't want anything on the Achilles because this tendon takes a lot of beating in pointe shoes, and we want to keep it as safe as possible. Now, if you notice, I have a lot of ribbon left over, so I'm going to place them together, and I personally like 3 to 4 inches out, and I'm gonna just go and trim like that, okay? Now you can untie it and take your shoe off and do this. I've done this so many times, I'm gonna just do it with my shoe on. But again, some people get nervous with a lighter, and that's fine. I'm gonna take this, and the other important thing is we're gonna fold it, and I stick it under. Another reason why I actually really love these elastics is they really keep my ribbons from falling out, because a lot of dancers' ribbons fall out. Okay, now I would not do this for a show. I would actually sew or tape these in, so I would never have a ribbon fall out on the show. But for class, this is fine. But again, see how there's that indentation? It's there, and now my shoe is more sleek. Okay, and that's the completed shoe. Another thing that is also really important, depending on your shoe and ribbons, you might have one ribbon longer than the other based on the inside or outside of your foot. So what I do, and I had a student that this was it was a little bit more drastic on her pointe shoe, so it really made a difference. On the inside of my shoe, I do R for right. I don't have to do right or left, I just know that they go together. So this one's the right one. That way I know that this is my exterior ribbon and this is my interior ribbon, because if I was to switch feet, my ribbons are gonna be by the time I tie them, they're gonna actually be even more offset, which would be a problem. So when you trim your ribbons, I would personally keep the shoe to each foot, but different dancers do flip-flop their shoes, so it really comes down. So if you flip-flop, just be aware when you cut that ribbon, you wanna make sure it's not too extreme, that they can be switched, or if you do cut it perfectly for a specific foot, I would go ahead and label it. And now that our shoes are complete, let's take a look at them. So I have mine on my foot, completely tied, and it should look nice and seamless and not a lot of bulk going on. Okay, so when we go into the demi-pointe, let's look at how and make sure that the elastic is keeping the heel on. Okay, if it was too loose, the heel would slip off, so this seems to be about correct. The other part that let's talk about is the ribbon. So we placed our ribbon to be placed where the top of our arch ended. So now if I go into the point, it does exactly that. So where my shank bends, I am leading up to the ribbon to keep it pulled snug against my foot. And I have my ribbons all tucked in, and again, a sleek look. So it looks really nice, accentuating the foot, making it look the best it can. And again, let's just test it. We go through the demi. Oh, it's staying on. Fantastic. Stretching, fantastic. Let's do a full releve. And there we go. They're on and doing their job. And then we can roll through and finish. Getting your pointe shoes is a rite of passage, but sewing your pointe shoes is a task. And I hope today I made it a little simpler and maybe a little bit more approachable on how and why you would sew your pointe shoes the way that you do. With that in mind, if you liked this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you want to see more, go ahead and hit the subscribe and hit the little bell because then it'll notify you of my next video. If you have any questions or comments or anything else that you would like to see, or even a question about how I sewed my pointe shoes, go ahead and leave a comment. And remember, trust the process and enjoy your journey.